When Forbes releases its annual list of the most powerful people in the world, more than likely it features CEOs of trillion-dollar companies, world leaders with military power, and celebrities with millions of followers. It seems like our culture has a very clear definition of what success looks like and who gets all the benefits of that success. But perhaps your life doesn't fit this list. Perhaps, I don't know, maybe it seems like you've been dealt a bad hand in life and you've experienced just the opposite, like battles with grief, with depression. Maybe you've dealt with rejection in your life, and maybe you've wondered when, if ever, you will get to experience some of the benefits of a life well blessed and successful. What if there's more to life than fitting into our culture's narrow definition of who gets all the breaks and the blessings? Around 2,000 years ago, a teacher named Jesus sat down on a hillside overlooking the Sea of Galilee. Crowds had gathered to hear him, not for the powerful or the elite. He came for ordinary people, many struggling with things like poverty, illness, and oppression under the Roman rule. They longed for some sort of hope, for some sort of assurance that their difficulties were temporary, that their lives actually mattered. What unfolded was one of history's most revolutionary speeches, known today as the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus began with a series of statements so counterintuitive and countercultural, they must have stunned his audience. He said things like this: "Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the meek." These declarations, called the Beatitudes, weren't just statements to give his audience the warm fuzzies. They were a profound reimagining of what it means to actually be blessed, to feel valued, to feel significant. And instead of affirming the cultural hierarchies of his day and ours, Jesus completely inverted them, pronouncing divine blessing precisely on those who society considered to be least. Let's explore these radical pronouncements and discover what they reveal about our own values, circumstances, and where we can find true blessing. Because in God's kingdom, blessing isn't reserved for the obvious candidates, but often flows most powerfully to the unlikely. The Sermon on the Mount, recorded most fully in the book of Matthew, chapters 5 through 7 in the Bible, stands as perhaps the most influential moral and spiritual teaching in human history. Mahatma Gandhi, though not a Christian himself, said it was the teaching that most influenced his philosophy of nonviolence. Martin Luther King Jr. based his civil rights work on its principles. Even those who reject Christianity often admire these teachings. But the revolutionary nature of Jesus' sermon isn't just in its profound simplicity, but in how it actually begins. He starts with a series of pronouncements that completely overturn conventional wisdom about who is blessed and who matters. Let's take a look at these statements one by one, known as the Beatitudes. Matthew chapter 5, verses 1 to 12. Matthew sets the scene in verses 1 and 2, writing, "One day as he saw the crowds gathering, Jesus went up on the mountainside and sat down. His disciples gathered around him and he began to teach them. Sitting was the traditional position of a rabbi teaching with authority. Jesus is about to deliver not a casual set of observations, but authoritative teachings about the very nature of God's kingdom. He begins in verse 3 with words that must have absolutely stunned his listeners. He said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." The word here for blessed means to receive a divine favor. But who receives this blessing and divine favor? Not the spiritually accomplished or perfect people, but the poor in spirit. In other words, those who recognize their spiritual almost bankruptcy before God. In first century Jewish culture, where religious achievement was celebrated and spiritual pride was common among religious leaders, this was revolutionary. Jesus declares that the kingdom belongs not to those who believe they have spiritual wealth or authority, but to those who know they actually don't. Think about who would have been the main audience listening to this that day. Not the elite of Jerusalem, although some of them may have been there, but it was common people, people from Galilee, people like fishermen, farmers, women, children, tax collectors, and other people marginalized by society. Many likely felt disqualified from spiritual blessings by the religious system of their day. To them, Jesus says, your recognition of spiritual need isn't a disqualification. It's actually a qualification. The kingdom belongs to you. In our context, this speaks powerfully to those who feel they just don't measure up spiritually, who are aware of their flaws, their doubts, and their failures. The kingdom doesn't belong to the spiritually self-sufficient, but to those who realize their need for grace. Jesus continues in verse 4. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Again, this would have surprised a few listeners because mourning was seen as a sign of God's disfavor, not blessing. The common theology of the day often linked suffering with divine punishment. But Jesus pronounces a blessing on those experiencing grief and loss and all forms of heartbreak. To mourn is to care deeply and to be fully human. The promise is not that mourning itself is good, but that those who mourn will be comforted. The Greek word for comfort here means to come alongside, to strengthen and encourage, which is significant because it tells us that God doesn't stand distant from our pain. He enters into it. Even more radically, Jesus later embodies this teaching by becoming a man of sorrows himself, acquainted with grief in Isaiah chapter 53, verse 3. Verse 5 continues, "Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth." This statement would have been perhaps the most politically explosive of all the Beatitudes that Jesus shared that day, because in the Roman Empire, it was the strong who inherited the earth, those with military might, political power, and ruthless ambition. Jews living under Roman oppression knew all about that very well. Meekness, on the other hand, was equated to weakness, something to be downplayed. Yet Jesus declares that the meek, not the mighty, will ultimately inherit the earth. The Greek word here for meek doesn't mean weakness, but strength under control. It was used to describe a wild horse that had been trained and disciplined. Think of meekness as power channeled through gentleness. Verse 6 shifts to a different definition of hunger. Jesus said, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled." Now, in a region where food insecurity was common and water was very precious, hunger and thirst were powerful metaphors that everyone understood. Jesus was saying that those who deeply desire to see right relationships between people and God and between people and each other are promised fulfillment, promised satisfaction. This blessing affirms that spiritual longing is important, and it's actually healthy. To desire for a world made right is to align with God's heart. For those who feel discouraged by that gap between the world as it is and the world as it should be, this beatitude offers hope. The hunger itself is blessed, and satisfaction is promised. Verse 7 introduces a quality that was not highly valued in the honor-shame culture of Jesus' day. Jesus said, "Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy." In a society where vengeance was considered a virtue and forgiveness often seen as a sign of weakness, Jesus actually elevates mercy to a central value. The merciful are those who withhold deserved punishment and extend help to the suffering. This reflects God's very own character. Jesus teaches that those who show mercy to others will also receive mercy in return from others. And more importantly, they will receive mercy from God. In verse 8, Jesus says, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God." Religious purity in Jesus' day often focused on strict external rules, such as ritual cleansings, avoiding certain foods or people who were unclean. But Jesus directs his attention to internal purity, like integrity, sincerity, devotion. The pure in heart are those whose external actions align with internal motivations, people who don't live divided lives. Their reward is extraordinary. Jesus says they will see God. This divine encounter isn't reserved for just religious professionals. Jesus is saying this is going to be available for those with integrity. Verse 9 says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." In a region dominated by the Pax Romana, which was peace maintained through military power, Jesus offers a different path to peace, not through domination, but reconciliation. It wasn't through violence, but actually peace. Peacemaking is something that's active. It's not passive. It involves interrupting cycles of retaliation and building bridges of love instead through reconciliation. Those who do this bear the family resemblance of God, who is himself the ultimate peacemaker. Now, the final two Beatitudes in verses 10 through 12 shift from character qualities to experiences of suffering. Jesus says, "Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." These would have been the most counterintuitive blessings of all. I mean, how could persecution possibly be a sign of God's favor? And yet Jesus teaches that those who suffer for doing what is right stand in the tradition of the prophets. Their suffering doesn't indicate God's absence from their lives, but rather it indicates that they are aligned with God's purpose in a world that often rejects divine values. Notice that shift from third person, "Blessed are those," to second person, "Blessed are you." Jesus makes this personal. He wanted to prepare his followers for the opposition that they will face. Taken together, these 8 Beatitudes that we've been talking about form a comprehensive picture of life in God's upside-down kingdom. They reveal 3 principles of blessings according to God's system. Number 1, God's blessings flows toward a need, not achievement. Unlike our merit-based systems where rewards go to the accomplished, God's blessings flow toward a need. The poor in spirit, the mourning, the hungry for righteousness. These are all practical needs. The kingdom comes not to those who believe they've earned it, but to those who know they need it. This inversion echoes throughout Jesus' ministry. He consistently directs his attention towards people who were overlooked by society. People like children, women, tax collectors, people with disabilities, and outcasts. The religious elite frequently criticized him for this, asking in Luke chapter 15, "Why does this man welcome sinners and eat with them?" They couldn't comprehend a system where divine favor flowed toward need rather than religious performance. This principle dismantles our achievement-based identities because many of us have built our sense of worth on what we've accomplished. But Jesus introduces a revolutionary alternative, identity based on being loved by God, not on our performance or position. Number 2, kingdom blessings often come disguised as worldly disadvantages. What the world sees as a disadvantage, like spiritual poverty, mourning, meekness, and hunger for justice, Jesus reframes these as a place of blessing. This doesn't mean suffering itself is good, but that difficult circumstances often become the soil where kingdom values take root and grow. Consider how persecution, while painful, often refines our faith and builds resilience. How mourning, while heartbreaking at the time, deepens our compassion for others. And how meekness, while appearing weak on the surface, strengthens our character. This helps us in our own struggles. What if the very circumstances we're praying to escape are actually the conditions where God's blessing can grow? What if what we think is a disadvantage, reframed through kingdom values, actually becomes the platform for our greatest transformation and impact? Number 3, kingdom blessings are both present and future realities. Notice the tenses in the Beatitudes. Some blessings are present, like theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Others are future. They will be comforted. They will inherit the earth. They will be filled. This tension between already and not yet runs throughout Jesus' teachings about the kingdom of God. The blessings of God's kingdom affect the present. Yes, by offering comfort, mercy, and a divine encounter now. Yet, they also await a full realization of the future when God's kingdom will reign. We don't have to wait for heaven to experience kingdom blessings. Yet, we also don't have to despair when those blessings seem incomplete. Pastor and author Eugene Peterson paraphrased Matthew chapter 5, verse 3 this way: "You're blessed when you're at the end of your rope. With less of you, there is more of God and His rule." This captures the essence of the Beatitudes perfectly. The invitation to find blessing not in human achievement, but in divine grace from God. The Beatitudes aren't just comforting words for the struggling. They're a comprehensive reordering of what we value and what we pursue. And here's what's most radical about Jesus' teaching. He didn't just pronounce these blessings, He embodied them. The one who blessed the meek demonstrated perfect meekness. The one who blessed the peacemakers became the ultimate peacemaker. The one who blessed those persecuted for righteousness would himself be persecuted to death. The cross of Christ represents the ultimate inversion. The King of Kings dying a sinner's death, the judge being judged, the innocent suffering for the guilty. In this supreme paradox, we find the heart of God's upside-down kingdom, where blessing flows not from power, but from surrender. As we look at the Beatitudes, we can ask ourselves, have I been pursuing blessings in all the wrong places? Have I overlooked the blessings hidden within my struggles? And most importantly, am I willing to embrace God's counterintuitive path to true blessing, even when It contradicts everything my culture has taught me to value and pursue.
Like a maple rooted deep, faith grows one season at a time. Nurture yours with hopestudy.ca. Free online studies on God's Word, health, and relationships, brought to you by Hope Channel Canada. Let truth flow sweet and strong. Start your journey today at hopestudy.ca.
So how do we apply these countercultural principles from the Beatitudes to our everyday lives? Let me offer 3 practical steps. Number 1, reframe your circumstances through kingdom eyes. The Beatitudes invites us to see our circumstances not as the world sees them, but as God sees them. Number 2, cultivate the character Jesus blesses. The Beatitudes aren't just about circumstances we experience, but also about character we develop. Jesus blesses specific qualities that often run counter to what our culture celebrates. And finally, number 3, look for blessings in the shadows. Many of history's most influential figures discovered their calling not despite their struggles, but because of them. Helen Keller's blindness and deafness opened her to many things other people missed. Martin Luther King Jr.'s experience of radical injustice fueled his vision for a better country. C.S. Lewis's grief after losing his wife produced the book A Grief Observed, which has comforted countless mourners. This week, identify one challenge you're facing. Perhaps a limitation, maybe it's a loss or opposition, and ask, what blessing might be hidden here that I couldn't receive any other way? This isn't about denying pain or forcing artificial positivity. It's about developing kingdom eyes that can spot divine blessings in unexpected places. When we learn to look for blessings in the shadows, we discover that there's no circumstance, however difficult, that lies beyond the reach of God's grace. Sometimes the darkest valleys contain the most life-changing encounters with the Good Shepherd who walks with us there.
Hope Channel Canada is more than a TV channel. It is a movement of hope, health, and salvation. Lives are being changed each day through our programs. You also can become an agent of hope in Canada. Whether through prayer, volunteering, or a donation, your actions create ripples of change. Just like threads woven into a tapestry, your small contribution helps to build something beautiful. All you need to do is to visit agentsofhope.ca or call 1-855-4-HOPE-TV to get involved. Thank you for your support.
In 2009, a young Wall Street trader named Sam Polk was living what many would consider the American dream. At just 30 years old, he had earned an $8 million bonus after an extraordinarily successful year. By every conventional measure, he was blessed. He was wealthy, he was powerful, he was successful. Yet, in his memoir, For the Love of Money, he describes a profound emptiness that no amount of money could fill. After much soul searching, he walked away from his lucrative career to found a nonprofit serving food to families. Polk's story illustrates what happens when we begin to question our culture's definitions of blessings and success. We discover what Jesus taught on that hillside in Galilee, that true blessings often look different than we expect and flows in unexpected directions. Today, we've explored these revolutionary teachings known as the Beatitudes, where Jesus pronounces blessings on those who society considers least blessed. And in so doing, he wasn't just offering comfort to the struggling. He was redefining what it means to be blessed and valued and significant in God's kingdom. We've discovered 3 truths from Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. First, we learned that in God's kingdom, blessing flows toward need, not achievement. Unlike our merit-based systems where rewards go to the accomplished, God's blessings flow towards those who recognize their insufficiencies. This invites us to embrace our limitations rather than just deny them, finding in our needs the very doorway to divine blessing. Second, we saw that kingdom blessings often come disguised as worldly disadvantages. What our culture views as setbacks, spiritual emptiness, grief, meekness, hunger for justice, Jesus reframes those things as positions of blessing. He's not saying that suffering is good, but that within our struggles often lie the seeds for our greatest transformation and impact. Third, we discovered that kingdom blessings are both present and future realities. Some of God's blessings break into our lives now, while others await completion in the future. This tension gives us both immediate encouragement and ultimate hope, helping us navigate the already but not yet nature of God's kingdom. Perhaps today you feel like one of the unlikely blessed, overlooked by a culture that celebrates very different qualities than those Jesus highlighted. Maybe you're experiencing loss. Maybe you're feeling powerless. Maybe you're facing some sort of criticism or working for justice against overwhelming odds. The Beatitudes speak directly to you. Your struggles haven't disqualified you from a blessing. Actually, it's quite the opposite. They've positioned you to experience God's presence and power in unique ways. The very things that seem to push you to the margins in our achievement-oriented culture may actually place you at the center of God's blessing. The cross of Christ represents the ultimate demonstration of this upside-down kingdom, the place where apparent defeat became cosmic victory, where surrender led to triumph, where death opened the door to resurrection. And so today, I invite you to see yourself and your circumstances through kingdom eyes, to recognize that there's more to life than conventional success and surface level happiness and wealth. There's the profound blessing of participating in God's upside down kingdom, where the unlikely become the blessed.